if you are married to a malignant narcissist and you're worried that your kids are going to be abused, or, I mean, physical abuse is something else entirely, right? But if you're worried about the messaging that they're getting, you can't offset it by staying. No. You don't get to offset it, because by staying, you are actually co-signing. You become complicit. And it's better for them to have a healthy, happy dynamic somewhere else 50% of the time than to be in it 100% of the time with you thinking that you're mitigating it. You're not.
Welcome to the Unquiet Sisterhood, a place where we can talk about real life, work, love, and more from a feminist perspective. I'm Jen Pavich, your host. And now, let's dive right in. Hey there, and welcome to the Unquiet Sisterhood podcast, episode 6. My guest today is Kate Anthony, a certified life coach who helps women decide if they should stay in or leave their marriages, and then guides them through the divorce process should they choose to leave. Kate empowers women to find their strength, passion, and confidence, even in the most disempowering of circumstances. She helps women move forward with concrete plans, putting their children at the center rather than in the middle of all decisions. Kate's also trained as a relationship coach. She's an expert in communication, co-parenting, and emotional intelligence, and she's the creator of the Divorce Survival Guide podcast. You can find Kate at kateanthony.com and on Facebook and Instagram, and we will have all of her links in the show notes. All right, let's get started. So, hey, Kate, thanks so much for joining me today. I'm super excited to talk to you.
Thank you, Jen. I am super excited to talk to you. I think this is cool.
So before we start, one of the questions that I kind of like to warm up with a lot of the time is just, I want to know what is kind of buzzing in your world, or what's capturing your attention, or kind of making you curious, maybe a little uncomfortable, unquiet.
Interesting question. We had the Super Bowl yesterday. I don't know how long you're... So The thing that's buzzing around my head right now a lot is just how unsexy Adam Levine is. But besides that, but also as an actor, I think that this, I don't know, is this relevant? Who knows, right?
Sure.
As a former actor, there is something so important about stage presence and about this, the thing that struck me, not just that, was that he was so not present. He's reaching out into the audience. There's nothing going on in the eyes.
I kind of got that too. Yeah. It really seems like he was phoning it in a little bit.
Yeah, it felt like he was marking it. Yeah.
Yeah. And almost there were parts of it where he seemed at the beginning, even almost out of breath, or it just made me wonder, what's going on with him? Is he sick or something? Or
I was like, did he get into a big fight with his wife? Is something happening?
Yeah.
Not happy to be there at all.
No.
So yeah, so that's, neither here nor there, but I don't know. It's a great question, and I'm having trouble answering it off the top of my head.
We can come back to it. Maybe something will pop up throughout our conversation.
Yeah.
So I want to know, one of the first things that I find myself curious about talking to you is I want to know how so you have a program called Should You Stay or Should You Go, for women that are trying to figure out whether or not they want to stay married. Yeah. So I'd love to hear maybe a little bit of your personal story and how that program came about, because I mentioned before we started recording, I absolutely love the directness of the name, and that, it just feels very real and there. And I read that title and I'm like, oh yeah, I can think of, who needs this, when and why and how. And
when it resonates, it resonates.
Yeah.
And when you're ready to have the question answered, it resonates even more, right? And I think that the real problem that most of us go through who have been through this, and as I have, and I'll tell you about that in a minute, is that for a long time we don't want to ask the question. We don't want to know the answer. So when you're ready, and it's what people are Googling. Yep. Really, should I stay or should I go? I don't know if I should leave my marriage. And so that's what the program answers. And how I came to it is I've been divorced for 10 years. And I went through it. I was in a marriage that was so volatile, and it was so awful. And we literally couldn't stay married for another day, but yet we kept trying. So we were in group couples therapy. We were in individual couples therapy. We were both in 12-step programs, and we were both doing all sorts of personal development work, right? Like, there was so much work happening to try to save this marriage, and nothing worked. Now, I have a little bit more insight now that I've been divorced for 10 years about what was really going on with all of that. But at the time, it was like, and then I thought, well, how am I supposed to know? When do you know that it's time to pull the plug?
Yeah.
And that's really like, we're doing this. Like, at what point do you say, like, you know what, we've given it our best shot? And I actually asked a friend of mine, and he was a friend that I was in group couples therapy with, because that is a thing, by the way. Group couples therapy is a thing. And, we had all these other couples that were sort of deep in our marriage.
That's got to be fascinating, because I know, individual couples therapy there's a lot going on there. And I've been on actually both sides of that.
Yeah.
And wow.
Group couple, there's group therapy, right? But group couples is something else too. And these people, we still get together for dinner almost, like, we started doing it monthly again.
Because I was wondering, like, I could see that sort of being pretty easy to, like, evolve into sort of side taking in situations.
Well, yeah, except that we were in this very controlled form of therapy called imago therapy. So it was like, you didn't hear, it was really about communicating and empathy and stuff like that. And there were certain things that were like real. I mean, there was one couple in there that we were judging. Yeah. And they didn't last very long, and they got divorced pretty quickly. And we were like, both of you are awful. So there was, but for the rest of us, I mean, we were together for like 3 years,
Wow. That's a long time for any type of couples therapy.
Yeah. It was pretty great. It was pretty great. But it didn't work to save my marriage. But when I was at that point where I was like, I don't think I can do this anymore, I asked one of the guys in there, because he was the only person I knew besides, like, my parents, who had been divorced before. This was his second marriage that he was in therapy with. And I asked him, I was like, how do you know? How do you know when it's time to go? And he said, when you know, you just know. And I was like, that is so not helpful, because I literally don't know. Like, I need a formula. I need a program. So I created what I needed, essentially, program.
Yeah, which is what a lot of us do, right? Like, a lot of this, it's the what we wish we had.
Totally, yeah. Secret. Spoiler, that's how all businesses are formed.
Yeah.
And what actually happened was that when I knew, actually. When I did know, I knew, and I knew it like with a frying pan upside my head. And my biggest conundrum, my biggest issue at the time was everyone was telling us I had to stay for my son. I had to stay for my son because, children from divorce end up completely screwed up, and I was, chief among them. And all of the things. And I suddenly got this moment of absolute clarity. I was staring into my closet, and I was just standing there, I think just literally staring into the closet. And I suddenly knew, like, in a moment, in a flash, that I had to go, and I had to go for my son. And I had this total download of, what we were modeling to him and what that was doing to him, that my ex-husband was incredibly critical. He was, I now know, emotionally abusive. And well, I knew it then too, but
you were trying to work it out.
But I was trying to work it out. And if I just loved him more, and if I loved him enough, and if I loved him the right way, and if I went on this diet, and if I went on that program, and if I, change this about myself, then I would be enough. So it was like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we all know how that story turns out. So I was, and I knew that my son, I was raising a boy, and I knew that I was raising a kid who the only model for relationships he had was a father who was hypercritical of his mother. And while I thought that I was this strong, powerful sort of, woman, I was honestly nothing like that.
Mm-hmm.
I was not. I was meek. I was codependent. I was pliable. I was, I was angry. God, I was so angry. And I think I had
were you putting on the Strong, Powerful Woman show kind of outside of your marriage?
Yeah.
And being different in it, or?
I don't know. It's so weird. I would have people say to me, you don't know how powerful you are. You really don't know how powerful you are. So I don't think that I actually was, but there was something inside me. I think that most of us that are in these kinds of relationships and, in our 20s and 30s and sort of coming into being, right, our true selves are in there.
Right.
Like clamoring to get out.
And there are a whole lot of things in our culture that have made them stay inside that long. Exactly.
And it wasn't until I was out of my, out of this oppressive system of a marriage, and doing my own thing and sort of finding myself that that came through. Right. And I think that I'm much more powerful now as a woman and as a, a role model or whatever, just as a woman, just like as a human, just by having that gone, right? I don't have to try to do or be or anything, right? Nobody ever tells me anymore, gosh, Kate, I just wish you knew, the power that most people are like, can I curse? Can we?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Oh, good. Oh, thank God. People are like, fucking rock on, girl, and so I know that I embody that now in a way that I just didn't. So I don't think that I think that I was trying it on in certain places for sure. But yeah, so I knew in that moment, and I knew I had to go. So I knew that what was going to happen was that my son was going to be a prick when he grew up. He was going to treat women terribly, and he was going to choose women just like me.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, hell no. In that one moment, I was like, nope, done, out. And I was done. And it was interesting because 2 weeks later, I told my husband, and everything, and that all came down on Christmas Eve. So that was fun.
Wow.
And, with a 3-year-old trying to do Christmas was just a nightmare. And then 2 weeks later, he came to me and he said, I'm so sorry. I just never thought you'd leave. And I was like, wow. So you knew, you could have changed. You chose not to change because you really just thought you could keep getting away with it.
That's telling.
Yeah, it really was. It really was. And no, but here's the flip side of all of this. My husband and I ended up having the best divorce ever. We laughed through mediation. We collaborate. We put our son at smack in the center of every decision that we made. Everything, every single one, was about, everything went through the lens of what's best for our son, what's best for our son. And we ended up being great friends and having a phenomenal co-parenting relationship. And most of that is because I think all the work that we had done to try to save our marriage, while it didn't work to save our marriage, it worked to, we kind of didn't have any resentments left.
Mm-hmm. And it worked to make you more functioning humans, I would imagine.
We
better able to do that.
We were emotionally intelligent. The one thing that we had done was learn emotional intelligence skills for, 10 years before this came down, so that at the end of it, we were like, all right, well, that didn't work. And at one point, our mediator said, you guys, how are you doing this? they were so baffled by us. And my ex said, I think that we tried so hard to make our marriage work that by God, we're going to make this divorce work. And we did.
Yeah.
And we did.
Well, and that kind of brings me to another question of something that you mentioned on your website, which is that like the US litigation system is kind of like designed to derail the process of divorce.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's also set up to make it as, filled with animosity and conflict as possible.
It's designed to screw up your kids. It's what it is. It's designed to put your children in. So the way that, custody is determined, or child support is determined by a differential in income and also percentage of custody. So before we went into mediation, we actually did something called collaborative divorce, which is even more collaborative than mediation. Very structured. You have a financial person, you each have a coach, and then there's an attorney. It's an awesome process, but you have to be, both parties have to be committed to it. It doesn't work. So, but before we went into that, I went and I consulted with a litigator because I wanted to know what my rights were. Like, I didn't even know. I was a stay-at-home mom at the time. I had no idea what I was entitled to. Like, I literally had no idea what my future looked like. So I didn't really know what I was mediating. And I was like, I want some information before I, do this. And so I went in there and he said, tell me your story. I was like, and he was a stay-at-home mom. And he said, well, how much does your husband make? And I told him, and he put it into a little computer program. And he said, and how much custody do you want? I was like, well, we want 50-50. I mean, neither one of us, I was like, he's a great dad. I don't want to take my son away from him. So yeah, we want 50-50, and this is how much he makes, and this is how much I make, which time was 0. And he was like, okay. And it spit out a number. And I was like, okay. And, thanks for the information. Meanwhile, I could have done that online. It's, but I didn't know. And he said, however, you see this little bar, we can actually move this over. And if we move it over so that you have more custody, then he'll actually have to pay you more money. So if we slide the custody bar over this way, you'll see how the child support goes up, correspondingly. And I was like, oh, okay, but I don't want to do that. Like, my son has a wonderful father. Why would I take my son away from his father? Well, because you can get more money. And I was like, oh, wow. I see how this goes. And I knew at the moment, I walked out of there, I felt disgusting. Like, I wanted to take a shower. And as over the last 10 years, as this has become my job and this is what I do, I've learned a lot more about this. And there are, people who will fight tooth and nail. There are now, generally speaking, it is husbands paying wives child and spousal support. That is not always the case, but given the income gap, with the wage gap in America, it's usually that. And so there's this differential. So men will fight tooth and nail to try and get more custody, even if they can't be present for their children. Right? So they would rather have their children with a nanny so that they have to pay less to their ex because they're fucking angry and fuck you, I'm not paying you, got a red cent. Right. And then there are women who, and because the litigation system is set up like this, my mediator was once on a panel with mediators, collaborative attorneys, and litigators. And they were talking about the differences between all of them. And my collaborative attorney, he asked the litigator, he said, so how do you know when to stop litigating? And the litigator said, when the money runs out.
Holy shit. That's honest.
Yeah. And it's the truth, right? They will litigate until the bank account is drained. And then they'll just magically come up with a solution that was probably available to them, $20,000 ago.
Mm-hmm.
But now you don't have a college fund for your kid. You don't have, retirement, whatever it is, because you've been put in this situation by litigators creating conflict. They will continue to create conflict so that they get paid.
Wow.
And it happens all the time, even though we live in, almost every state in the union at this point is a no-fault state. So you can't be like, he cheated on me, so I get more money.
Mm-hmm.
I literally don't know what people come up with to fight about, to litigate about. I mean, there's property, it's awful. It's awful. And meanwhile, the people that get screwed are the children. Mm-hmm. Because they're put in the middle. And what the litigation system does, far and above anything else, is that it fuels the fire of resentment and blame. It keeps people angry. And anger is what, perpetuates litigation. Mm-hmm. If you actually worked out your anger and you actually processed through your shit and owned and took responsibility for what was yours and forgave the other person, you could collaborate and your kids would be fine. Because what happens is when you're an angry parent, you're bad-mouthing the other parent, you're saying shit about them, you're competitively co-parenting, so you're one-upping your spouse, kids know.
And the kids are stuck in the middle. Yeah, because it's a deliberately antagonistic process.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be. Yeah. It does not have to be. Now, if you're divorcing a narcissist and you're divorcing someone or as a malignant narcissist. I divorced a narcissist, but he wasn't a malignant narcissist. So if you're divorcing a malignant narcissist, all bets are off. Like you can't do that because your only job in that relationship is to capitulate to their wants and needs and desires, which are ever shifting and changing, and you'll never get the right, you'll never win. Right.
But I would assume that even in those situations, like the women that you work with, there are still options for, working within as much as you can, not throwing gasoline on the flames.
Yes. So I talk a lot about keeping I've lost words. Keeping your side of the street squeaky clean. Right.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what kind of shit.
Yeah. That's a 12-step saying, isn't it?
It is. It is. Yes. That doesn't matter what kind of shitstorm is occurring on his side of the street. Mm-hmm. You act with integrity within yourself. You take care of your children. You show up and be the best mother and the best human that you can, so that every single night when you put your head on the pillow, you feel like it may be horrible, it may be difficult, it may be stressful, but you feel like you didn't get, caught up in it. Mm-hmm. And that's really the best that you can do. And, at the end of the day, your kids know. Mm-hmm. When your kids get older, even younger ones, I have a friend who is co-parenting and just recently divorced a malignant narcissist. And his 8-year-old comes to him and says, "Daddy, I feel like mommy, she knows. Mm-hmm. She knows." And he doesn't ever say anything negative about her. I don't know how. But he just, he shows up and he's a good parent, and at 8 years old, she knows the difference.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's not only that, but when you're kind of, like you said, keeping your own side of the street clean, not only does that from a legal perspective help you to be able to stay clear-eyed, kind of stay in the process in integrity, but it also from an energetic perspective, it's fucking exhausting to be in constant conflict with someone and to kind of be in that space of trying to one up them all the time and, go back and forth and this and that. Yeah. So I would imagine, you can be a better parent and a better person from that place of just,
energetically side of the street. Totally. And sometimes when you're dealing, especially with a malignant narcissist, there are certain things that you just have to be like, fine. Mm-hmm. Right? Because you can't keep fighting them because that's what they want.
Right.
It's literally that, if you're playing a game of tug of war and you just drop your side of the rope and you leave, and you may lose stuff, but you'll gain your sanity and your freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's worth everything.
Yeah, that's worth its weight in gold for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I want to ask you about something that to be honest, I saw something kind of in this vein somewhere lately, and I can't remember where, but it sort of got me thinking. So a lot of times women will go through kind of an awakening in their lives, not to sort of be confused with the mis and overuse of the word woke lately. But kind of sometimes it's sort of in that vein, right? Like
Sure.
there are things that like once you start seeing stuff in your life that you just can't unsee.
Can't unsee it.
You know, whether it's kind of people pleasing or looking at your own kind of social conditioning, or even going further into things like maybe in the political sphere and feminism and oppression, and, you know, and I think for a lot of women that comes into their lives, you know, when we get to the point where, you know, we're not just kind of so hard on the hamster wheel, just trying to stay alive with the expectations of our culture.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I, you know, kind of see come up as a question during this time for a lot of women, and I know it's something, you know, like, so the beginning of my awakening, whatever, like happened in my late 20s, was this idea of, can my marriage actually survive this?
Oh, yeah.
Is that something you see? And what do you kind of tell women, or what advice would you have for someone who's kind of in that place?
Well, the work that we do around it, right, is so, you know, yes, that's huge, especially today, especially in our political landscape, in our cultural landscape. Like, this is huge.
Because we're seeing many more women waking up now.
Yeah. And some digging in their heels. And I often look at those women and think, I think that consciously or unconsciously, you're making a choice here. You're making a choice because if you were to even crack that door open, the house of cards goes flying.
Yes.
Flying. So, you know, absolutely.
I think we see that, frankly, with the women who voted for Trump.
I was thinking exactly of those women.
Because, you know, and I've actually started to write a piece about this, like about 12 times, and just, it's not there yet. But it, you know, it is just that, right? When you've spent your entire life based on the idea that my safety and my value in our society is entirely dependent on the approval of men.
Yep.
How do you see that and then try to unsee it?
Right.
That's a burn it down kind of situation.
My entire worldview is about me being compliant to my dominant husband.
Yep.
And if I vote opposite, I vote for Hillary, no less. Not just against Donald Trump, and not just like not in line with my husband, but for a woman. What am I saying? What am I
and
doing?
So much of it is unconscious, because I think that a lot of those women would not come out and say that they were submissive to their dominant husbands, but they are. You know, like their whole sense of value is, you know, I mean, you know, then we get into like virginity culture and like just lots and lots of things.
Well, and so it's true. Most of the women who come to me and are ready to do this work have already seen the things that they can't unsee.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, fuck, what do I do now? And the way that we work with this a lot, especially in the should I stay or should I go, the like people who are actually really, you know, genuinely not sure, we start to work with values, and it becomes very clarifying. So as an example, just sort of a basic example, I was working with a client on her values, and she has a very strong value around personal development. Obviously, she was working with a life coach, right? Obviously, you know, she listened to podcasts, she read all the books, she did all the stuff, she was working with me. So obviously this woman has a very strong value around personal development and growth and sort of, you know, the exploration of the human psyche. And she was married to a man who categorically did not believe in therapy.
Wow.
And so at that point, now, first of all, there's two layers to that. On the one hand, you know, I always advocate for couples therapy. like if you haven't been in couples therapy and you can't get through anything, I think, in a marriage if you don't go to couples therapy. Like you don't know what you don't know. You need an outside, like you have to do it, right?
Marriage doesn't come with instructions.
It does not.
We don't learn how to communicate. We don't learn how to fight fair. Like we don't,
none of it. Like, right. We're so ill-equipped.
Yep.
So there's so much learning to be done. So if, and I say this I say this on every podcast and all the time. If you are trying to decide whether to stay or go and your spouse is literally not willing to walk into a therapist's office with you, you are hamstrung. There's nothing you can do if you're not happy. The other layer of this with this client was that this was a complete conflict of values. Like this is such a misalignment that is like really at the core of who she was as a human. So to be able to, and so once she saw that, it was like, I can't be in this marriage. I literally can't be, like my whole world is about personal development. And how can I be married to somebody who doesn't share that value even a little bit? In fact, is anti that value. Yeah. And I work with other clients who, similar, and this is really tough with co-parenting. I have a client who was, her husband was a Trump supporting misogynist racist. And she couldn't, and they're raising 2 boys. And she was like, she, one of the questions that she had was, do I stay married so that I can be there when he says stuff and like catch it? Yeah. Or do I create another environment entirely? And my answer to that is always create the other environment, because if you stay, they're in that environment 100% of the time. If you go, they're in it 50% of the time. And then in 50% of the time, they are completely immersed in something else.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because I've actually, had friends and clients who have been in that space of, maybe a relationship that's emotionally abusive, that kind of thing. And sometimes the thought is, if I go, he's going to have them 50% of the time. Yes. And I'm not going to have any control over that time.
Yep, absolutely. And I actually have a webinar about that this week. And I don't know when this is going to be airing, but maybe it's last week. Maybe it was a month ago.
I have a feeling we're going to be like in the beginning of March, but
yeah. So a month ago, I did a webinar on this, and it was all, and really, that's one of the things. And I talked to actually a clinical psychologist who works in very high conflict cases with malignant narcissists, and she's the Department of Children and Family Services refers people to her for super high conflict cases. And she said, she's the one who said no. She said, if you are married to a malignant narcissist and you're worried that your kids are going to be abused, physical abuse is something else entirely, right? But if you're worried about the messaging that they're getting, just think that they will be, no matter, you can't offset it by staying. No. You don't get to offset it, because by staying, you are actually co-signing.
Yeah.
Everything.
Become complicit.
You become complicit, and it's better for them to have a healthy, happy dynamic somewhere else 50% of the time than to be in it 100% of the time with you thinking that you're mitigating it. You're not. I could not have stayed in my marriage and talked to my son about powerful, strong feminism and women while continuing to be complicit in my own oppression. Right? Because they don't do as we say. They do as we do.
Oh, yeah.
The models are a lot more powerful than than actually doing something about it. Right? We can talk about feeding the homeless all we want, or we can go out and volunteer and take our kids with us and show them what it's really like. We can take them to marches and,
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yes. So in terms of seeing things that you can't unsee, yes, right? So I think that once my client was like, oh my God, I think my husband's a racist, and I think I'm really not okay with that. And she had been in this culture for so long and was coming out of it. No, you can't unsee it. You can't unring that bell.
Yeah. And that's a real growth opportunity and also a really difficult place to be.
Totally. Oh yeah. I mean, it's heartbreaking. It's very difficult. I have other clients who, some who are like in the Bible Belt, like really, and they're suddenly like, I don't think this religion or the way that this religion has been, co-opted and, used, the messaging, the convenient, plucking of messaging. I don't think that
of the patriarchal bits
just the patriarchal bits, right? Just the ones that tell you that you're the wife, and so you stay home and you take care of things and you stand by your man no matter what. Once you're like, I don't think I believe that. I don't think I want that for myself. Yeah, you don't have a choice.
So, what occurs to me too, when we start to think about this question, like, should I stay or should I go, is, there's kind of the emotional piece of it, right? When am I emotionally ready to make a break, or, when do you know it's time? And then there's a kind of a whole other financial, logistical piece of this puzzle.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How do you work with that?
Well, so I'm not an attorney and I'm not a financial planner. There is something called a certified divorce financial planner. And I strongly recommend that people find one of those, because I can't, it's not my area of expertise, and it would be, I think it would be unethical for me to pretend that it is. I'll talk about like, what's the reality? So there's fear versus reality, right? Yeah. So when people are like, I'm scared that I'm not going to be able to afford it, I'm scared I'm not going to be able to support myself, then it's like, all right, let's talk about that. Can you? Is that true? Is that actually true? Or is that your inner critic? Is that what you're like starting? Is that a story you're making up? Or is that actually true? And if it is true, great. It's important. The logistics are important. It doesn't mean you stay, but it means that you get crafty, or you get a new job, or you really look at like, okay, well, how can I? How can I support myself? Right. But you have to do, I think, the way that my program is layered is that the first piece that we do is called Who the Hell Am I? And it's all the inner world, like all inner critic, inner guide, boundary work, communicate, like all of the stuff that's just all about who we are. Right. And it's really a confidence and self-esteem building period.
Which is such an important thing to do when you're on the fence about a question like that. Right.
Absolutely. Because 9 times out of 10, they want to go, they're just scared. Right? 9 times out of 10, they're not Googling, should I stay or should I go, if they want to stay. Right? They're pretty much almost, not everybody leaves that I work with, but it's, so that is the baseline. That is the foundation. And then the next module in the program is how the hell did I get here? And we talk, and it's all education. It is all about the patriarchy. This is where I radicalize unsuspecting feminists.
I love that term, unsuspecting feminists.
I'm like, okay, here we go. We're going to learn about the patriarchy.
You didn't know you were a feminist.
You didn't know, but watch out. Yeah. By the end of this module, they're so fucking fired up. They're like, where do we sign up? Where do we march? Because, we talk about how, I go through sort of the history of marriage, what marriage was, how I call the white picket fence, our jail cells, our jail bars, right? Is the white picket fence, right? Because as we became industrialized and we had cars and we could move to the suburbs, we became separated, and then we were put in these single family houses, and we lost our tribe, we lost our community, we lost our village, right? And women need that shit.
Absolutely.
Women fucking need it. Yeah. And it is a tool of the patriarchy that keeps us in our own separate houses. And, this is why every woman I know wants to move to a commune. It is in our DNA.
Well, and not only that, but we have kind of like the Disneyfication of girlhood, right? That's taught us that, community and friends and animal sidekicks, what have you, are wonderful until we get to the point where we meet the one.
Yes.
the prince. And
The
then,
prince and then we get on his horse and go to his castle.
exactly. And that's the end.
The
end of the only thing that matters.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. I talk a lot about that. I talk about rom-coms. I talk about Nicholas Sparks and how he's, you know,
sorry, since our listeners can't hear me, just huge eye fucking roll there.
Since you can't hear an eye roll, it was really
that
bad.
one was pretty loud though.
It was pretty loud. And yeah, and so we do all of that. So by the time we get to the third piece, the third month of the work, which is what the hell do I do now? Like there's a good base from which to make those decisions. Yeah. So now they know that they can fucking get a better job or ask for that promotion or, you know, make all of that logistical stuff and hire the right like, so
they're ready by that point.
They're ready
that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they are. Yeah.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
And I just commend you for providing such an amazing service, not only to women who are like on the fence, but to the rest of us who need more feminists, unsuspecting or not. You know, it's funny, like that word has been so charged throughout its history. And I, yes, I actually like have a running list of, I don't know if you remember, I think it was Jeff Foxworthy that used to do the whole "you might be a redneck if."
Oh yeah, yeah.
I have a running list of like "you might be a feminist if."
Oh my god!
Because
you do it as a video. Oh my god!
I've been thinking about it. Yeah, something, a video, maybe some stand up, like whatever. Because I think that far more of us would actually identify as feminists if we really knew what that meant.
Hell yeah! Hell yeah! Absolutely. Absolutely.
So many people are really uncomfortable with that word though, like so many women. And I'm just, you know,
I love it. I'm not a feminist, but
really, why not?
Really?
Are you misogynist then? You know,
yeah, why not? Yeah.
That's how I've started responding to that is, well, then what are you?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I just believe that women should, you know, have equal rights and blah, blah, blah. Okay. So you're a feminist.
Yeah, that's really something.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. Oh well.
So tell me about, even though it may have already happened, I'm assuming that it might happen again. Tell me about your webinar.
Okay. Depending on how it goes, it might actually live as a thing on my website. So so it's called "Should I Stay in My Marriage for My Kids?" 3 truths revealed. And the 3 truths are: number 1, that you deserve to be happy, which as women, we tend not to really believe. Ultimately, we may say it, we may give lip service to it, but most of us actually don't believe that because we've been so conditioned to put everyone's needs ahead of our own, especially in motherhood.
It's almost like the subtext is women deserve to be happy as long as they've made everybody else happy first. The dishes are done. The house is clean. Yep. You know, everything is all good. Then you can be happy.
As long as you don't rock the boat, you can be happy. Right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I say, and I say this in the webinar, is that if you're afraid of rocking the boat, it's probably not your boat.
And I like that.
You deserve to have your own boat. You know, so that's truth number 1. Truth number 2 is that divorce doesn't screw up kids. How we do divorce screws up kids more than anything. And there are statistics that actually bear this out. I'm not like making shit up, right? There have been massive studies done around the world, tracking and charting, you know. I hear this all the time from women who say, my husband says that if we get a divorce, our kids are going to become drug addicts. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me right now? Like, I mean, it's a nice power grab, but the statistics, the research does not bear that out. What the research supports is that if you use your kids as pawns, if you badmouth your ex, if you put them in the middle and you jerk them around, they're going to get screwed up.
And they're going to get screwed up even if you do that within your marriage.
Exactly.
Which is usually what's happening in those situations.
Exactly. So that's not what screws up kids. That screws up kids, not divorce. So, and then the third truth is that one happy home or two separate happy homes is healthier for children than one unhappy home.
Absolutely.
And we're told over and over again that kids from divorce, end up screwed up, or that, we have to stay for our kids and all of that shit. And it's just not true. If you're unhappy, and even like we talked about with the narcissist, even if you're worried about how, the messaging, or, even racism or whatever messaging that you're afraid your kids are going to get in the other house, you have an opportunity 50% of the time to create a really strong foundational role model for them, and in the end, they're going to get to choose. And if they have you as a parent who is a solid, stand-up, emotionally intelligent, personally developed human, they're going to notice that. Yeah. It might be until not, it might be when they go to college or when they're adults, but they're going to look back and be like,
when they have kids of their own. Yeah.
Kids of their own, they're going to be like, oh my God.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it's simple math in some ways too, right? Like being in a toxic environment 100% of the time is a totally different thing than having at least 50% of your time in something that can be a refuge from that.
Yep. 100%. Exactly. So that's really what the webinar covers. It's way more in depth than that, but those are the three truths, and that's what we talk about.
That is absolutely fabulous. And I will make sure to keep an eye on your website and put it, in the show notes.
I'll let you know if it becomes if it becomes an evergreen thing, I'll let you know for sure.
And we're of course going to put all your stuff in the show notes, where people can follow you, how they can sign up for, stay or should you go.
Yeah, and I have a podcast too. So that's if you're listening and you're a podcast person, hop on over to mine too. It's the Divorce Survivor Guide. Yeah. So yeah.
So thinking about the work that you do with women, what is something that you have found to be true in your work that you think people wouldn't expect or kind of might surprise them? Because I think that this is one of those situations where it often feels so alone when you're the one on the fence thinking and looking.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that you find that people really have in common, but they might not realize?
Well, I mean, it's really interesting because, I running this group program, this is my first group program, because women tend to think that their stories are unique, that they're, it's really private. It's really personal. I don't want to share it with other people. I don't,
Yeah, there's a lot of shame around divorce issues and
shame.
Marriage issues, and
there is. And what was beautiful about the first time the first round that I did this past fall of my group program was that these women were all like, "Holy shit, I'm not alone. I'm hearing my story, my words coming out of other women's mouths," and that to just have them have that experience. And that's now actually why I prefer to do the group work, because I want women to have that community. I want women to have that place where they can tell their truth and have other women go, oh my God, me too. And if not me too, like my heart is bleeding and I'm here for you and I love you. And I believe.
Yeah, it's that village that you were talking about.
It's the village. Exactly. And so I feel like the group work is so important in this. And there's a little bit of a harder sort of sell for it, because women are like, but I think it's actually more important. I think that aspect of it is super important. I don't know if I answered your question.
I think you did, because I do think that, and I've seen this with my clients who are sometimes asking this question, there is this sense of, I'm the only one who's going through this. I'm completely alone and no one else would get it, because things have gotten so fucked up that it's really hard to talk about. And, looking around and comparing, it's like anything, right? Like we do it as women, we look around and compare ourselves to other women who are, just women or business owners or other moms, or and it's very easy to do that, just like it's easy to do that with other couples. But the fact is, nobody ever really knows what goes on in someone else's marriage.
No. And what, we talk, in 12-step programs is a slogan, don't compare your insides to other people's outsides, right? And we are constantly comparing you know, our worst days with other people's Instagram days.
Yes.
And like, it's awful and it's toxic. I will say one of the things that surprised me, because I think that was your original question, right?
Yeah.
It's something that surprised me. Something that's really surprised me is I am always surprised. And this is, and I don't know whether this is just because of the line of work I'm in, right? But I hear such horror stories about how men are treating women.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, yeah, we're living through the Me Too era.
Yeah.
We are living in times up. Like we know this to be true generally. And I guess there's a part of me that often thinks it's like, well, it's over there, or it's a certain type of guy or something like that. But, you know, and the biggest thing is, for me, my assessment of it at this point is that it's toxic masculinity in action. Mm-hmm. It is men who don't want to do the work. It's mm-hmm. men who don't believe in personal development. It's men who don't want to go to therapy, who have been taught for generations, whatever the deal is, right? That men don't do that.
And men aren't supposed to have feelings. And men
are not supposed to have feelings.
They're not supposed to talk about them.
Nope. We don't talk about that shit. We just like, you know, and the other thing that I hear a lot is that he'll say, well, this is who I was when you married me. I haven't changed. You knew it's like, but you're a human. Don't you want to change? Don't you want to, like, isn't that sort of the human condition? But apparently not for everybody. And so it has been shocking for me. It's eye-opening to me, to realize how pervasive it actually is. And because I'm a coach and because my clients are all over the country, mm-hmm. it's everywhere. It's not just in, you know, the places that we would think it would be. It's everywhere.
Yes, it is everywhere. And it is, you know, and that goes across all financial lines, cultural lines, you know, 100%. All of the other thing that I think I often find surprising, or less so now, because like you said, it has become so pervasive, is the stories about just really horrible treatment or abuse or assault or whatever that are so shocking that come from a woman that is a fucking rock star.
Yeah.
And that is really what makes me know what women are actually made of.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, the thing that goes along with this whole thing is the gaslighting and mm-hmm. and that these women don't know that it's not okay.
Yeah.
That we're actually living in this era. And when they'll tell me their stories, I will say, I pull no punches. Mm-hmm. And I will say, like, that is not okay. That is abusive. That's not acceptable behavior. And I will I will tell them why. I'll go through, you know, everything. And they're like, oh my God. They're really shocked.
Yeah. Well, nobody gets there overnight, right?
No,
I mean, that's how, especially emotional abuse.
Yep.
It's this, you know, gradual chipping away of sense of self where, you know, things just keep becoming the new normal.
Yep.
And absolutely. You can't see how fucked up that normal is when you're in it.
Exactly. It's the frog in water, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you put a frog in a pot of boiling water, it jumps the fuck out. You put a frog in a pot of cold water and you turn on the heat on a low simmer and it'll cook itself to death.
Wow. I hadn't heard that one before.
Yeah. And that's
I won't try it. Don't worry.
Don't try it. Right? It's like, well, it's actually
it makes total sense.
Right? And that's what we do. We're the frog, and we're like, and we've been conditioned from all the external forces, right? And sometimes it's not the men's fault because they've been conditioned by the same forces, you know? And when she finally realizes, like, I don't want to do this anymore. Mm-hmm. I don't want to do this anymore. I can't continue to be complicit in my own oppression. Like, this is insane. Yeah. And once they see that, they can't unsee it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also one of those things, like, when you think about that within a marriage, like, yes, both people are always conditioned, right? We're socially conditioned from the day that we're born, but you can't force someone else to see their own conditioning before they're ready.
No, you can't.
It's just not possible.
And you can't, once you've seen it, go to your husband and be like, hey, I just figured this thing out. You're actually emotionally abusive. Like, that doesn't work. You can't be like, oh, and you're a malignant narcissist. And so now here's what we can do to fix that. No.
Well, I mean, it's just like the women Trump voters that we were talking about, right? Like, you can't, nothing that I can do can force them to see that conditioning.
Nope.
And that's, the bit where people have to be led and not dragged.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I start my program off slowly. Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, this has been so much fun, and I'm so glad I got to talk to you. And I'm super excited about how you are radicalizing unsuspecting feminists, because I think that along with, just the work that you're doing for women around this issue that's so huge is just awesome and amazing.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited that we got to do this. I'm grateful for you having me on, and I love it. I love it. I love what you're doing.
Right back at you. And thanks to everybody that listened today. And like I said, we'll put all of Kate's information in the show notes so that you can stay in touch with her as well.